two, 1, 2.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. We will begin shortly. Please ensure that your phones are switched off or on silent. Thank you.
Let me stand outside and I'll text.
Let me stand outside and I'll text. Yeah, is that better? Because that gives you more lead to. I'll stand up more lead to. I'll stand outside when I see them. Exactly.
Okay, we can switch to the next slide, I think.
When I see them. Exactly.
Okay, we can switch to the next slide, I think. This one? Yes, but it's not showing. It's not showing on the screen. This one? Yes, but it's not showing. It's not showing on the screen. No, it's not showing on the screen. It's not showing on the screen. Okay, because they're coming in a few minutes. Okay, because they're coming in a few minutes. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. We will begin shortly. Please ensure that your phones are switched off or on silent. Thank you. Begin shortly. Please ensure that your phones are switched off or on silent. Thank you.
Dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. We will begin shortly. Please ensure that your phones are switched off or on silent. Thank you.
ต
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. We will begin now. Please ensure that your phones are switched off or on silent. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. We will begin now. I would like to welcome the distinguished dignitaries and invite them to take a seat at the head table of the hall. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which will address this year's theme of transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies. I now invite His Excellency Dr. Ahsan Iqbal Chaudhry, Federal Minister for Interior, Planning, Development and Reform of Pakistan and Chair of the 4th APFSD, to conduct the opening.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, welcome to the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. It is always a pleasure to return to this forum. As we start the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, please allow me to say a few words. I am honored to address you this morning in my capacity as chair of the 4th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. It is my pleasure to revisit with you some of our major achievements in building a robust architecture for eradicating poverty, promoting prosperity, and achieving sustainable development in our region through APFSD. The 4th APFSD had 2 remarkable outcomes. After 2 years of intergovernmental efforts, the regional roadmap for implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Asia and Pacific and the form and function of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development were adopted. We also agreed on regional perspectives to the global debate in respect to poverty reduction and shared prosperity for all. A member of the Bureau, Her Excellency Rosemary Edilon, reported the outcomes of the 4th session of the APFSD at the high-level political forum on sustainable development at a moderated session held on 17th July 2017. In a presentation on behalf of the 4th APFSD Bureau, she highlighted the key messages emanating from the 4th APFSD and underlined the important role that the roadmap for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and Pacific will play in advancing progress in the region. She also underlined the importance of regional cooperation for implementation of inclusive sustainable development and the key role of ESCAP in leveraging its intergovernmental platforms for coordinating regional actions. Over the past year, the Forum contributed to the regional dimension discussions at the HLPF by sharing Asia-Pacific perspectives during the ministerial segment session and 2 side events organized on the regional roadmap and the voluntary national reviews. Moreover, the sub-regional consultations in preparation of this 5th APFSD gave the opportunity to member countries to share achievements, challenges faced, and opportunities arising from the 2030 Agenda, including the potential of national strategies adopted, the pace and sequencing of actions taken, and the harnessing of SDGs through effectively addressing the interlinked dimensions of poverty. I'm looking forward to hearing what countries have to report in respect to the roadmap, and I'm pleased to see that the agenda of this APFSD is fully aligned with the form and function document adopted last year. I trust that the present and future sessions of APFSD will continue to embody the same spirit of collaboration and multi-stakeholder engagement that has become the mark of the past APFSD. I sincerely hope that this APFSD will continue to play an important role by supporting crucial dialogue among member states, sharing experiences and strengthening implementation in order to achieve sustainable development in Asia and Pacific. I'm looking forward to our deliberations in the next couple of days. I thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations, Ms. Amina J. Mohammed, has sent a video message in occasion of 5th session of Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to greet the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, organized by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. I welcome your theme, Transformation Towards Sustainable and Resilient Societies. This will also be the theme for this year's high-level political forum in July, and for good reason. Resilience is critical to the functioning of societies everywhere as they face increasingly complex risks and strive to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. One key challenge for the countries of Asia and the Pacific is how to best pursue a more integrated approach to development, in which there is dignity for all, leaving no one behind, with the full realization of human rights, equality, social justice, and protection of the natural environment. Economic growth has reduced poverty and improved quality of lives in many countries of the region. Investments in education, healthcare, and infrastructure are showing good returns. Social protection spending as a share of government expenditure is also increasing, and other aspects of fiscal management are improving. Yet people across Asia and the Pacific live with diverse and interlinked risks. These are related to increasingly severe and complex shocks to the political, social, economic, and ecological systems that underpin human development. And the impacts often fall disproportionately on the most marginalized groups and communities, and so they have the potential to undermine the region's potential for achieving the SDGs. Your gathering is an opportunity to advance the dialogue on the region's ability to boost resilience and accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. For over 1/3 of the goals, data shows slow or stagnating progress since 2000. For another third, the data suggests that the region is moving in the wrong direction. The region is on the right path for only 1/3 of the goals. In getting to the transformation we need, we have to emphasize the totality of the SDGs rather than the individual goals, given the integrated and cross-cutting nature of this framework. The Secretary-General and I attach great importance to the regional perspective of this work, and we count on your commitment to building more resilient societies and a better future for all. I wish you all a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, after these encouraging words, I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Don Pramodevinai, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Thailand, to deliver his statement.
In Thailand, you probably know the word Swaddi Krap. I should start off with Swaddi Krap to you all. Mr. Chairman, Ministers, Excellencies, Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Royal Thai Government, I would like to warmly welcome all participants to this 5th session of Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, or APFSD. Thailand fully supports APFSD as a significant platform for countries in Asia-Pacific region to exchange success stories, take stocks of the challenges, and discuss ways forward to realize sustainable development. Time is of the essence as we now move into our 3rd year since the adoption of 2030 Global Agenda. It's apparent that the current pace is not fast enough to achieve all targets and goals within the set time frame. And to achieve SDGs, we don't just need more action, we need better action. That is qualitative, not merely quantitative. This year's APFSD topic on transformation towards sustainable and resilient society is relevant to every country. Resilient is the bedrock of a sustainable society. A resilient society is better prepared to take on all challenges, be it disaster, environmental degradation, climate change, rapid urbanization, etc., etc. These challenges tell us that development must be enhanced in a balanced and sustained manner by maintaining social equity, fostering economic growth, and fully taking into account environmental impacts. The good news is that countries in the Asia-Pacific region have already started this process of development transformation. Last year, we endorsed the Asia-Pacific Regional Roadmap for implementing the 2030 Agenda, We further welcome the establishment of ESCAP's Rapid Response Facility to support key aspects of SDG implementation across different thematic areas. This will surely help member countries to translate goals into action and decide results. Mr. Chairman, let me point out some key elements that Thailand finds crucial for better actions toward a more sustainable and resilient society. First, there's a clear relationship between the impact of disasters, poverty traps, inequality, and potential of conflict. The latest Asia-Pacific Disaster Report finds that each disaster leads to a 0.13 point increase in the Gini coefficient. Thailand thus believes that in making development more sustainable, communities need to be resilient to disaster, be it man-made or natural. The ESCAP Regional Cooperative Mechanism for Disaster Monitoring and Early Warning under the Regional Space Application Program for Sustainable Development helps in this regard. It uses data and imagery from region space and shares it with others to build disaster resilience. Also, to address the impact of climate change, Thailand has also forged partnership with Japan in the project for capacity development to accelerate low-carbon and resilient society in the Southeast Asian region. The project helps the regional climate change specialists to expand their network and have greater access to suitable training courses such as mitigation mechanism and climate finance. Second, to enhance resiliency, we also need to focus on empowering people and community. We believe that local communities possess unique and innovative wisdom. Communities often have their own homegrown practical solutions. A concrete example is from Chumphare District Slum Upgrading Initiatives, a highly successful project under the Ban Man Kong Collective Housing Program. This initiative puts people in the community at the center of all development endeavors. They became the main driver for their community development while working in partnership with other stakeholders. An exhibition on this initiative is in front of this conference room, and I encourage all participants to drop by and have a look. Third, to better attain SDGs, we need to strengthen the means of implementation. One significant means of implementation is through the use of science, technology, and innovation, or STI. We believe that STI can be a key driving force for SDG realization. In this regard, Thailand has introduced Thailand 4.0 policy to transform our economy into an innovative and value-based economy, focusing on sustainable growth, production and consumption and development. A couple of years ago, Thailand experienced the worst drought in decades. However, the country is able to lessen the impact thanks to the science-based information. We used Earth observation satellites to monitor water levels in reservoirs to seasonally forecast and predict climate scenarios. Farmers are warned about the ensuing drought well in advance and advised not to plant a second crop because of water insecurity. Concrete example in applying STI on the ground are, to name a few, the Hoi Plalot community model in Tak province and the Petong Lang Plat communities in Khon Kaen province. These communities have applied STI in the field of water resource management, land use, quality, seed selection, farming techniques, etc. As a result, these communities can better manage land and water resources, have higher productivity, and at the same time, empower community members. Another vital avenue to strengthen the means of implementation is certainly through partnership and networking. It's clear that public finance alone would be inadequate, and innovative financings need to be initiated to fill the remaining gap. For Thailand, we have introduced the Pracharat policy as an innovative form of both financial and know-how mobilization, which also entails the synergy of public, private, and people partnership. Example of successful Pracharat projects can be found throughout the country. Now, lesson learned from us, for us, Thailand here, in this context is that governments cannot no longer do it alone and should not do it alone. We must harness the power of networks and partnership at all levels. That is, we need to provide platform for inclusive partnership and multi-stakeholder engagement to leave no one behind. Thailand firmly believes that all sectors of a society must be meaningfully engaged. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as the national lead agency for SDG 17, has already established an open-ended working group for Sustainable Development Goal to provide policy space for civil societies to voice their ideas, share their concerns, and suggest what they believe to be the way forward. Mr. Chairman, in parallel, partnership at international level should also be enhanced. Thailand now serves as coordinator for ASEAN, ASEAN-EU, and ASEAN-Asia Cooperation Dialogue, or ACD, on sustainable development. We need more time, we need more intra- and inter-regional cooperation for sustainable development. Thailand will also establish the SIMIO, or South Asian Minister of Education Organization, Regional Center for Sufficient Economic Philosophy for Sustainability to be the regional knowledge board, and Integrated Exchange Center on the application of SEP as an approach towards the achievement of SDGs for countries in our region. A stronger regional collaboration can be expected once the center is established. Moreover, Thailand continues to advocate South Triangular cooperation for sustainable development. One of the legacies of Group 77 Chairmanship is the SAP for SDG partnership. Thailand has continued providing technical cooperation and sharing the SAP as our homegrown approach towards SDGs with many countries in Asia-Pacific. We stand ready to continue doing so. An exhibition on SAP and SDG is also being SDG is also being displayed in front of this conference room. I encourage you all to have a visit as well. Mr. Chairman, Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, in closing, let us empower the communities, promote innovative means of SDGs implementation through homegrown approaches like SEP for SDG partnership and innovative financing, STI, as well as inclusive partnership. Let us take better actions and make SDGs a reality. A time is here for us all to pour our hearts to deliver on our promises. I thank you very much. Enjoy your stay in Thailand.
Khurb Khun Krop, thank you. Excellency, for your warm and welcoming words. I now have the honor to invite Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her keynote address.
Your Excellency, is this working? Okay. Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, our gracious host, thank you for recognizing the work of ESCAP on sustainable development, and thank you for outlining rich initiatives of your country to promote sustainable development. You also have played an excellent leadership role to harness ASEAN in a common way to adopt and mainstream sustainable development. Mr. Chairman, your leadership was very well recognized in New York as the chair of the Commission of APFSD, and your recounting what was communicated to HLPF is very valuable to us. Thank you for gracing the occasion also. Excellencies, other ministers, deputy ministers, distinguished delegates from the various embassies and other participants. Welcome to the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, for short called the APFSD. In its 5th year, this is a mature platform, fully institutionalized and integrated across policy areas thanks to your leadership. To feed effectively into the high-level political forum, HLPF, this year's APFSD will consider regional progress towards the 2030 agenda, the voluntary national reviews, and opportunities to learn from our peers as work to achieve the SDGs gathers momentum. In line with HLPF, this platform is structured to encourage deliberation on how to support the transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies, as was mentioned by the Deputy Secretary General. Asia and the Pacific has a strong record of economic growth, out of which far-reaching social change has been achieved. The region's resilience has been tested time and again, and it has withstood numerous shocks caused by unsustainable economic policies, excesses in the financial sector, and overexploitation of natural resources. Most pronounced were the 1997 regional and 2008 global financial crises, through which the region managed to navigate well. It withstood financial growth and trade disruptions, while supporting global growth. The region has jump-started the implementation of the regional roadmap, as you heard from His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand. Statistical baselines have been developed, and work is underway to improve methodologies and new measurements in sync with the requirements of SDGs data and statistical systems. Some progress has been achieved to install sustainable development policy frameworks. Technical cooperation and advice offered by ESCAP is helping and will continue to help enhance capacities and the understandings needed to foster integrated approaches to economic, social, and environmental sustainable development. Resource mobilization strategies at both federal and subnational levels, and the unhindered movement of goods and capital flows. Yet, as we intensify our work for ESCAP member states, we must recognize progress towards the 2018 HLPF target goals is uneven, since that will be a subject to be discussed in July. Let me try to recount some of these goals. First, under Goal 6, it is notable that around 6% of our population remains without access to clean water. Underlying these averages, some of the countries have worse position. And a third of the region's population lacks access to safe sanitation, particularly in rural areas. Over 80% of the wastewater from the region's developing countries is not treated before being reused or discharged into rivers or the sea. The current rate of freshwater withdrawal is unsustainable in many countries. Second, let me turn to goal 7. Over 400 million people remain without electricity, and billions exposed to health hazards from the dirty cooking fuels and air pollution resulting from energy supply and network deficiencies. The energy transition is critical and hinges on a wider adoption of cost-effective, clean, renewable technologies, the development of power grids, and greater energy efficiency. Yet, progress towards changing the energy mix is slow, despite China, Japan, and India being among the world's top 5 countries for wind and solar energy generation. Third, despite moves to develop new and smart cities and communities, focus of goal 11 exclusively, about a quarter of the region's population lives in informal settlements. Living conditions in many urban areas is deplorable, given poor solid waste management practices, for one. Fourth, sustainable consumption and production focus of goal 12 practices must be stepped up as rising incomes, urbanization, and resources-intensive growth patterns are exacerbating resource depletion and ecosystem degradation. Forest areas continue to shrink. A third of the world's endangered species are in our region. Fifth, we continue to work to strengthen partnerships, goal SDG 17, as I will come to in a moment. Idea of presenting this storyline on the focus goals for HLPF is to make sure you brief your delegates to be prepared and equipped when they are delivering their statement at HLPF with hopefully more solutions to the problems I have identified. As the region pursues sustainable development, we must examine innovative options to bridge SDG gaps faster. Besides sectoral action, analysis is needed of effective transmission mechanisms and safeguards built through integrated approaches to policy challenges and supported by tighter regulatory architectures. The Asia-Pacific's region's resilience needs to be strengthened to mitigate long-standing and emerging vulnerabilities. To secure our region's future and reinforce sustainable development reforms, our analytical work has been deepened to unpack the complexities of how to leave no one behind. We are tracking and analyzing inequalities, gender, and social parities, and looking at the causality and providing policy solutions to address cross-cutting challenges, work that will come to the forefront during the Regional Commission in May. A platform for science and technology is now supporting the design of cutting-edge technologies, innovative practices, and the promotion of impact investment and social enterprises to generate jobs, enhance productivity, and overcome environmental challenges. The Financing for Development platform has evolved resource mobilization strategies, as I mentioned, and generated tax policy advice to deal with inequalities and disparities, while sharing the emerging experience of fintech for financial inclusion deepening. At the same time, work is underway to improve government's capacities to structure public-private partnerships and develop climate-friendly and resilient infrastructure. Regional Cooperation and Integration Platform has advocated mainstreaming sustainability to deal with transboundary challenges for trade, finance, and infrastructure, and to tackle shared vulnerabilities. During our regional cooperation and integration deliberations, we did acknowledge the influence of the mega trends such as an aging population, urbanization, the degradation of agricultural land, and frequent natural disasters are significant challenges. Global warming and the resulting sea level rise means our vast region is exposed to transboundary climatic and environmental risks. In 2017, monsoon rains in South Asia claimed 1,200 lives, affected 40 million people, and costed about $1.2 billion. The average annual losses due to flooding in South Asia stands at 12.4 billion. By 2030, floods could cost the sub-region as much as $215 billion each year. Pollution of air, water, and land is severe and can result in premature deaths. Commodity price movements in oil markets, as occurred in 2014, brought their own complications as commodity exporters faced a severe economic contraction. This year, our analytical work has been extended to strengthen resilience frameworks to deal with multiple diverse risks with social and macroeconomic consequences. Our work advocates the adoption of a coherent and systems thinking approach to promote resilience focused on sustainable transformation of economies backed by resource management, effective institutions, and enforced regulations. Building effective resilience frameworks for future requires the identification of drivers and sources of risks and how these risks and vulnerabilities interact across sectors. Complementary and interrelated capacities are critical for establishing prevention and mitigation mechanisms to avoid the magnitude of losses that I have hinted at in the midst of my presentation. This has to be backed by, one, anticipatory capacities to strengthen planning and preparedness to anticipate and reduce impact of shocks. Two, to develop absorptive capacities to nurture coping mechanisms. Three, adaptive capacities to facilitate swift and smooth post-shock adjustments. And fourth, transformative capacities to deal with system risks, vulnerabilities, and inequalities. You will find more details of it in our flagship report, which is hopefully available by now. This strategic approach and its components that I've outlined, if effectively implemented, will strengthen prevention mechanisms, develop mitigation solutions, and offer an opportunity for human systems to bounce back after shocks. This new architecture to foster the exchange of knowledge required to support the means of implementation, including technologies, data and access to information, finance, trade, and investment. This support is essential. Strengthen governance, legal and institutional mandates, stronger civic education, upholding human rights, allowing social enterprises to innovate and promote sustainability and resilience. Together, these elements create the right conditions for inclusive change. And as we know, women end up suffering the brunt of the shocks more than men, and hopefully inclusive change will bring them in the net. Regional partnerships and cooperation are, of course, a prerequisite for our endeavors to succeed. There have been a lot of partnerships we have entered into in the last few years, which are paying very high dividends to us. They enhance our capacities and knowledge that we bring to you in addition to what we have ownership on. I'm delighted that we have been able to work once again with the ADB and UNDP to produce the report that I talked about on the transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies in Asia and the Pacific. But also, we have counted on a number of other UN agencies, in particular the UN University, to develop guidelines for multi-stakeholder partnership. To support progress towards regional roadmap for sustainable development, ESCAP's Regional Response Facility, as mentioned by the Minister, is being tapped now by a number of member states to promote resilience. I thank the contributors from the member states who have allowed us to use the funds for this rapid response facility to the advantage of our countries with special needs and also some developing countries. Among others, it has helped to enhance what the Minister mentioned, the regional integrated multi-hazard early warning systems for Asia, established in 2009, with the support from ESCAP Multi-Donor Trust Fund on tsunami, disaster and climate preparedness in anticipation of emerging risks. And a special thanks to the contributors of this, Japan, Thailand, Sweden, and few others. Switzerland. Second, deploying the ESCAP trade network to encourage resilience of critical commodity trade networks. Third, integrating management of ecosystem and river basin management. Fourth, promoting cross-border electricity power trade to improve energy accessibility and affordability. We will have an Asia-Pacific Ministerial Energy meeting early April, and I would like to thank some of the extra budgetary resources which are going to be used courtesy China and Russia. Tapping regional city twining and South-South cooperation to assist urban wastewater and solid waste management, reuse and recycle with social, environmental and economic benefits while effectively tackling growing pollution. More work remains to be done to improve human and social capacity, reduce institutional rigidities, and galvanize the required social momentum for change, and, of course, build resilience for sustainable development. I look forward to working with all of you to deliver across the board, and hopefully we will be able to talk more about it thanks to the richness of experience that you all bring to the table, and look forward to seeing all of you during the next few days, but also for the events that are to follow, not only the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Energy Platform, but also the Regional Commission that is to take place from 13th to 16th of May, with the high-level segment from 14th to 16th. Thank you so much for coming out here and gracing the occasion and contributing to this platform.
Thank you, Madam, for your very insightful and inspiring remarks. Our next speaker is invited to represent the voice of the stakeholders. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, please welcome Ms. Joanne Carling to deliver her remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to be an indigenous human rights defender and activist for more than 30 years. I come from the Cordillera region in the Philippines, which is the homeland of indigenous peoples. During my youthful years, I have worked with the neighboring Kalinga tribes who have strong indigenous institutions and are proud of their cultures. In the early 70s to 80s, they have prevented the construction of 4 large dams along the Chico River that would have submerged their rice fields, villages, and forests. Their sustained opposition to the dam projects resulted in massive arrests and detention and the killing of tribal leaders. Yet they remain steadfast, and they continue to manage their resources in a sustainable way. This earlier struggle of the Cordillera peoples have inspired me to commit myself to advancing people's rights, human rights, and environment protection. I have thereby been at the forefront of campaign against development aggression from large mining, agribusiness, hydropower, megatourism as part of the indigenous movement. Are we thereby anti-development? No. We, as indigenous peoples, are in fact pursuing sustainable development that cares for nature and peoples. Collectively, we manage our lands and resources for the present and future generation. We are opposing development that causes destruction, conflicts, displacements, hunger, environmental problems, and worsening inequality and human rights violations. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world is now embarking on global agenda to achieve sustainable development, we need to recognize that peoples are the real actors. Indigenous peoples' territories are the home of 60% of the world's biodiversity, which is their greatest contribution to sustainable development, yet their rights and territories are not secured. Small farmers are producing 70% of the world food, yet most of them are hungry and landless. Workers who have created the greatest wealth are underpaid, poor, and live shorter lives. Women who take care of our children, protect nature, and work tirelessly experience violence and discrimination everywhere. These are the people who have given and sacrificed the most, and yet are not recognized for their roles and contributions to development. However, those that are destroying massively the environment and exploiting labor of men and women are still deciding our development path. Ladies and gentlemen, with the theme of transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies, we need to address the structural barriers and ensure the enabling environment for people to be empowered and contribute. Accountable governance and respect and protection of human rights are necessary in creating an enabling environment. Mechanisms for the democratic participation of peoples are imperative, instead of repression and criminalization of people's movement, environment, and human rights defenders. An inclusive and bottom-up approach to development planning with the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, the indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, women, migrants, LGBTIQ, elderly and young people, among others, ensures that their specific needs and aspirations are fully integrated and their effective participation in implementation and monitoring shall be guaranteed. Building resilience means empowering communities to take control of their development and future. Resilience and sustainability will only be achieved by putting people and nature at the center and pursuing shared but differentiated roles, responsibilities, and actions that bring different sectors and groups, institutions, governments, and business to work together. We need new avenues and platforms for partnerships and cooperation that are grounded on the principle of accountability of states, corporations, and investors who have the power and resources to undertake transformational actions. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are now on the third year of implementing the 2030 Agenda, with the pledge of leaving no one behind, we need stronger political will and more concerted actions from all of us to dismantle the systemic barriers, ensure policy cohesion, and provide an enabling environment for people's effective participation and empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joanne Carling. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to move to Agenda Item 2, the election of officers to the Bureau. The Bureau will comprise co-chairs and vice-chairs. May I now open the floor for any nominations for the positions of co-chairs and vice-chairs. I recognize the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh.
Mr. Chair, my delegation has the honor in proposing the following delegates to serve on the Bureau for the 5th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. As co-chairs, His Excellency Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, India, and His Excellency Dr. Livan Devitashvili, Minister of Environment Protection and Agriculture, Georgia. Following the tradition of the Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, all ministerial level participants in attendance are proposed to be elected as vice chairs. My delegation is confident that the distinguished delegates who have been nominated would discharge their duties efficiently and effectively for the successful deliberations of the forum. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The distinguished delegate of Bangladesh has nominated His Excellency Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, India, and His Excellency Dr. Livan Devitashvili, Minister for Environment Protection and Agriculture, Georgia, as co-chairs, and all ministerial level participants in attendance as vice chairs. Would any delegation wish to second the nomination? I recognize the distinguished delegate from Fiji.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation has the honor in seconding the nomination which have been proposed by the distinguished delegate of Bangladesh for the various bureau positions for the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. My delegation has full confidence in the proposed Bureau in discharging their duties for successful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Fiji. Are there any other nominations for the Bureau of Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development at its 5th session? So I hear none. I thus have the pleasure to formally announce that the Bureau of the 5th session of Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development is composed of the following. As co-chairs, His Excellency Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, India, and His Excellency Mr. Livan Davitashvili, Minister of Environment Protection and Agriculture, Georgia. All ministerial level attendees as vice chairs. Please join me in congratulating the officers of the Bureau for this election. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, India, to conduct this meeting in representation of the co-chairs of the meeting from this point forward.
His Excellency Dr. Iqbal, the outgoing chairman, first let me thank you for having led the forum, the Bureau, with such efficiency and elan for the last time. After that, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed an honor and privilege for me to serve as the co-chair for this important forum. For myself, on behalf of the other co-chair and other members of the Bureau, I wish to express our appreciation to the distinguished representatives for the confidence you have placed in us. And I wish to assure you that we will try and follow in the footsteps of Dr. Iqbal to the best of our ability. This session of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development will be critical in charting the path forward for our region. As the Executive Secretary said in her opening address, collective regional action to strengthen the resilience of Asia-Pacific communities and deliver the 2030 agenda is needed more than ever before. We have an intensive agenda ahead of us. As co-chair of this 5th session of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, I shall do my best to ensure that the meeting achieves its objectives and produces meaningful outcomes. Our Bureau will rely on the spirit of cooperation and involvement of all distinguished delegates and the able support of the members of the Bureau. I also wish to thank the Secretariat for its organization of this forum, and I'm sure that we can count on its continued good work. I would like to express my particular appreciation to the Executive Secretary, Dr. Akhtar, Ms. Amina J. Muhammad, His Excellency Dr. Iqbal, His Excellency Mr. Don Pramod Vinay, and our speaker representing the voice of stakeholder groups, Ms. Carling, for their thoughtful messages during the opening session. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us now take up the agenda item 1C, adoption of the agenda, as presented to you in document ESCAP /RFSD /2018 L1. Are there any comments on this document? If there are none, the agenda is contained in document ESCAP ESCAP stroke RFSD stroke 2018 L1 is adopted. If any delegates propose amendments? Thank you. Thank you, and I take that agenda as contained in document is now adopted. Distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your cooperation in adopting the agenda of the 5th session of the APFSD. Before we take a break, I understand that the MC has some announcements to make. I now invite the MC to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we proceed for the break, please allow me to make some important announcements. It is my pleasure to invite all heads of delegations to join the group photo during the upcoming break. The photo will be taken in front of conference room 2. Please ask ESCAP staff for assistance if required. Let me remind all delegations to submit their statements to the conference room officers. A form to request to speak should be completed to ensure that you are recognized by the chair. Kindly submit your requests early to ensure availability of our interpretation services. We also invite all participants to visit the Pavilion of Partnerships, which provides an opportunity for informal networking and exchange of experiences. On the first floor, you can explore the SDG Help Desk and Energy Portal, dive into a virtual reality experience, and take pictures in our interactive selfie booth, where our staff will be happy to assist you. Furthermore, we encourage you to join the conversation on social media using the hashtag APFSD. We shall resume at 10:35 to consider agenda item 2, considering we're running slightly behind schedule. Kindly return to the conference room on time to avoid delays. Thank you for your kind attention.
And resume at 10:35 as the MC announced. The meeting is adjourned. Good. With that.
No, because liaison officer only for ministerial. So Sri Lanka, their head of delegation can join the full vote. Okay, but they don't get a liaison officer if they're from
Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2. my some, check 1 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. More. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2 3. Check 1 2 1 2 3. Check 1 2.
เอาไปวาง3ตัวก็พอที่โต๊ะละตัวเย็ดอันนึงผมไม่รู้เขานั่งไหน1 2 3เดี๋ยวเขาก็ยื่นไมค์ส่งต่อกันอยู่ดีเย็ดอันนึง1 2 3ตัวก็พอผมว่าอีกตัวหนึ่งไว้เผื่อมันมี3โต๊ะเลยโต๊ะละตัว
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
I think it becomes better because the light is directly on my face.
She'll be here. She will be there. มีสีตัวใช่ไหมเก่งมันเป็น FC อ่ะ They start there, no? The chair starts. The secretary starts.
Only the ESC will be here.
Check.
I understand that they have to be there in their seats, right? It's not mentioned. Yeah. I would think so, because the only people that we know is here.
พี่เลยดึงเอาจากข้างล่างลงมาจากข้างบนลงมา แต่ไม่ต้องเติมแล้วข้างบนไม่ต้อง
Yeah, this is all I got. I don't have any other. Ringing the bell.แต่ว่าสามตัวมันไม่เป็นไรมันไม่เป็นเลยพอมันกวนเราก็ไม่รู้หรอกเราไม่รู้ว่ามันเท่าไหร่เปิดเมื่อกี้ลองเช็คกับตัวที่ตัวนี้อ๋อมันเป็นยิ้มกดใจเลยถ้าตอนแรกที่เขากดเลยเขากดเองเขากดมันไม่อาจจะเขาออกเขาไม่บุกเป็น
1, 2.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please do take your seats and turn off your phones so we can avoid any further delays. Thank you so much for understanding.
Why? Oh, okay.
So just make sure that it's switches.
Yeah, the other way, they are still having coffee with the ears. Okay, then probably they're... Hey. Can you...
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and turn off your phones. We will begin. They can just... I think they're waiting.
No, this doesn't say to be called. I don't know.
Guys, I mean, for the next sessions, I want the liaison officers 5 minutes before to be with their people in the... Come up, and so we are looking for India. Well, Arun, why is Arun here and not India? Arun should be together with the Indian. No, they sit directly here. So ask him to do something.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We will begin.
Pronounce your first name. I've been trying to find out.
Just call it kids.
Okay, that would be good.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting is called to order. It is indeed an honor and privilege for me to assume the responsibilities of Session Chair for our consideration of Agenda Item 2, Regional Perspectives on the Follow-up and Review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Specifically, this session will discuss the theme of transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies. The document pertinent to this session is titled Regional and Sub-Regional Perspectives on the Transformation Towards Sustainable and Resilient Societies, ESCAP/RFSD/2018/1. This session is structured as follows. We will start with a moderated panel discussion on the theme, along with interventions by a few selected discussants on the theme of the session. Afterwards, I will open the floor for the delivery of country and stakeholder statements on the theme. As you can notice, moderator and panelists are already seated in the sofa chairs in front of me. Let me now invite the moderator of the panel, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, to take over the session. Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a bit awkward to have them at the back rather than at the front. But in any case, given the structure of this room, I'd like to appreciate the presence of all the excellencies who are going to be proactively participating in the panel. So let me start with the first segment. I'd like to take a minute to introduce the distinguished panelists participating in the high-level dialogue. First of all, I'd like to recognize His Excellency Mr. Alexander Bedrusky, Advisor to the President, Special Representative of the President on Climate and Sustainable Development, Head of Interagency Working Group on Climate and Sustainable Development. Thank you, Your Excellency, for coming out here. I'd like to also recognize on my right His Excellency Mr. Levon Davishvili, Minister of Environment, Protection and Agriculture, Georgia. Thank you for coming and being a co-chair as well. I'd like to turn to His Excellency Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog from India, and also the Chair of APFSD. I'd like to finally introduce a women panelist. It's a real pleasure to have Kika. She's allowed me to simplify her name to avoid any mistakes. Minister for Women Affairs, Social and Community Development from Samoa. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. We've heard this morning in the opening statements the challenges our region faces, but also the resilience that our region has illustrated. Going forward, of course, we have to position ourselves more effectively. The risk landscape is indeed very complicated, just because we have a very large region with a lot of sub-regional diversity. But some of the common drivers across the region are rural-urban transition that's going on perpetually, climate change, which is hitting us harder, demographic changes. We are going to be the largest continent. We are and will continue to be in terms of the population. There is, of course, increasing demand for natural resources because of the population pressures, but also because of unsustainable practices. And we are a region which is a very open region, so we face the challenges of economic liberalization and technological challenges, which is unfolding every day and will come with its own attendant risks and challenges. Of course, this means the disadvantaged groups that we have will, the ranks of the disadvantaged groups could potentially swell if we do not really develop our economy's capabilities and capacities to withstand shocks. Particularly, we need to worry about the vulnerable groups, the small island economies represented out here, but also, as I mentioned, South Asia is exposed to huge floods and displacements and the aggravation to agriculture caused by that. So we need to create huge amount of awareness of these risks, and we need to build resilience. We need to build resilience both with the support of public, but more so with the private action. Resilience has to enable individuals, communities, and systems to survive, adapt, grow, transform themselves following the stresses and shocks that they face, and to also figure out a way to convert these risks into opportunities. There are, of course, given the size and the landscape of our region and the dynamism, there already are lots of successful examples of resilience building within our region. And I would very much like that to request the panelists to share their experiences, and so that we can learn from each other through this panel. So rather than get too bogged down into the variety of risk and the diversity of risks, which I have tried to outline in a macro sense, I propose that our panelists take the time to talk about what are the successful examples of resilience in their countries, in their sub-regions that they could share with us, and focus on the learning and the solutions for effective policy responses from the experiences that their countries or the sub-regions have faced for resilience building. So let me start with the first question, and let me start with our women panelist, Kika. What are the most promising policy and institutional responses to strengthen resilience in your country? I'm going to keep the questions very simple to allow panelists to cover more if they wish to, and take less time on this platform. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
You have the... I think it's maybe open.
Hello. Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. A very pleasant good morning to you all. Talofa lava, and I bring you greetings from the government of the independent state of Samoa and its people. And I am very happy to be part of this panel and thank our hosts for the invitation. Well, in regards to the moderator's question, for Samoa, we have prioritized and integrated the goals and targets in Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, 6 accelerated modalities of action, Samoa pathways, regional frameworks, and other high-level commitments into our national plan, the strategy for the development of Samoa. The same priorities are also filtered down to the 15 sectors and further down into district community level plans. Making the linkage of high-level commitment into our national policies realize Samoa's commitment and effective response towards building and strengthening resilience. Samoa National Policy for Gender Equality 2016 to 2020, whereby the 7 priority policy outcomes outline the strategic direction in terms of programs and interventions to strengthen resilience on all areas and at all levels in Samoa. It calls for the inclusion of all, mainstreaming gender and social inclusion on all areas, whether it be social, economic, governance, climate change, social mobility, to mention a few. Institutional infrastructure for gender mainstreaming and social inclusion has been established not only at the national level, but at local government level through the setup of district development committees. This approach is very much in line with the SDGs of helping first those in need and leaves no one behind. It requires the development of a vulnerability tool to identify the most vulnerable people to be assisted first. Through investing in climate-proofed infrastructure, this is the premise of the reconstruction of the economic corridor for the country, from the West Coast Road, from capital to the airport. The program does not just involve roads construction, but also ensures that climate resilience measures are included as part of the construction, such as well-planned drainage systems. Increasing resilience to natural disasters, we have put in place early warning systems, including public education programs on preparedness for cyclones prior to the onset of the cyclone season, and has also meant a review of the National Building Code to ensure cyclone-resistant standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me now turn to His Excellency Mr. Rajiv Kumar. I think everybody knows how large and complicated the Indian economy is, given it's home to over 1 billion people. And I think we are very fortunate to have Rajiv Kumar, who has very broad-based development experience. And now he's heading this new institution, the National Institution for Transforming India, NITI, which has taken on some very new role for itself in terms of not only being a think tank, but also reflecting on innovative ways. So Your Excellencies, it would be great to hear from you also about the experience from India on policies and institutional responses to strengthen the resilience. And it would be good if you can share also Asia-wide experience given your background. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Akhtar, and Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants. It's just to repeat, there is a real privilege to be here representing my country on this very important forum. And may I start by saying that the very tenet, the very core philosophy of this government in our country, led by Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi, has been to work for the poor and make them more empowered. And that's been the, and in some sense, shift from a practice of entitlements to empowerment. So that if each person can then be more resilient, and especially those who are at the bottom of the pyramid or the last in the queue. And in that context, there have been several schemes, some of which have been designed and launched by Niti Aayog in the country over the last 4 years. And the latest one, the latest two of these are actually worth a real mention, which is one, we've just started a program on what we call the aspirational districts of India, and we've selected 115 of them. They are called aspirational for very good reasons, but these are the, and on the basis of carefully selected 15 variables, the most backward districts in our country. And the objective is that within the next 3 years, we will raise them at least to the national average. And Niti Aayog is going to be monitoring them on a quarterly basis on real-time data. And the district administration, plus also the central government, will converge their schemes to make sure that this happens. The idea being that if these districts, can come up to the national average and we look and we focus on them, then the rest will in some sense follow, and the resilience will get built in at that level. The second scheme, again, which was where a lot of work was done at my organization, is the scheme called the Ayushman Bharat, which means really the sort of healthy India, and which is actually, in its scale, is quite staggering, and it will be rolled out by October, and which is to ensure that the bottom 400 million people, 100 million households in India are covered by the health insurance coverage, where the premium is paid by the government. And the insurance coverage will be 5 lakh rupees per family per year, which approximates about $8,000 US dollars. And it's a massive scheme, and we are now setting up a national health authority in the country which will look after, which will, and make sure that there is no gaming of the system and the scheme remains, is effectively and efficiently delivered. And for the first time in India's history, really the poor will not have to be, taking care of their own health expenses and not suffer from the trauma that you always get when you get into a medical emergency, and which sees a large number of them shift back to poverty lines. So I think, and my hope is that this will become a universal health coverage in the years to come. Now that's and for an emerging economy to take on that sort of task, I think, I hope we succeed and be very credible. The other thing that the other scheme that has now been in operation for actually more than 10 years, the previous government started that. In fact, since 2003 it has started, is called the Prime Minister's Rural Road Schemes. And there is now in the country an 88% coverage of rural roads. We have connected all habitats with the asphalt roads up to 500 households, and we are now taking it to the 200 households. And I think we will see that happening in the next 2 or 3 years. We have launched a Clean India program, the Swachh Bharat program, where the Prime Minister was bold enough to declare in his Independence Day speech that we suffer from the almost the evil practice of open defecation, where lots of people are forced to do that, and declared the target that we will make India open defecation free by the 2nd October 2019, which happens to be the 100th anniversary of our leader Mahatma Gandhi. And I'm glad to report that now we have 13 states already declared in that open defecation free, and we will get 22 within this year, and then the rest will follow up to October. And this, Dr. Akhtar, has a huge advantage in terms of nutrition status of the children, because the hygienic leads to the to sort of all sorts of diseases and diarrhea, and that if we can prevent that, then there is this additional impact. Finally, just the last two things I think one must mention. One is that we've launched from Niti Aayog a national nutrition strategy, and we are focusing there specifically on undernourished children and anemic mothers. And this is a program that I'm personally very heavily committed to, because I don't think in the region as a whole, this is one blemish that we need to get over as soon as we can, and I think it's within our capability to do so. And this is where regional cooperation, I think, would be very useful to learn from each other, because there's not rocket science here. There's something that we can easily achieve. And the National Nutrition Strategy is now, we've got a portal where we have real-time data from the district level to monitor the progress of this scheme. And finally, we've taken up the task of electrifying all our villages. And 3 years ago, about 18,000 of them were still unelectrified, which is quite a pity. But now we've come down, these numbers have come down to about 800 a bit. And most of these, a large majority of these, are in the very difficult hilly terrains of Arunachal Pradesh and Himachal Pradesh, where it's very difficult to get the generating sets, etc. But we are sure that we'll achieve. So all of these, along with our National Disaster Management Authority, all of these schemes are meant to improve the resilience and also to take the benefit of growth directly to the underprivileged and the excluded in the population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, for sharing some of these Prime Minister's pretty radical initiatives, as I see, and having very well-targeted programs, and hopefully with you being there, there will be very effective accountability and monitoring. And let us turn to His Excellency Levan David Shivli on some of the policy and institutional responses for building resilience in Georgia. And over to you.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege to present Georgia in this forum. Thank you. I'd like to share also some of the examples of our institutional and policy changes in governance, which actually improve resilience of our society. This is mostly our 4-point development agenda, which is our plan to transform the country and society to more resilient society. And this is an ambitious plan that we have education as number one to build a society and to increase employment in the country. Probably, and we need to be as flexible as possible to the demand from the market side. That's why we are promoting dual education system. It is very common practice in many European countries, especially in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, that you have ability to learn and in parallel you have possibility to practice in work, so that we get practical experience and training so that they are adapted to the demand on the labor. So transformation process of labor force is very important. The second one is actually governance reform and e-governance. We have to make bureaucracy as little as possible and to make our governance as efficient as possible so that we consolidated number of ministries, and so we have less ministries, and we are setting up an electronic platform of information so that every social or public service is available also online, so that anybody interested in public services can easily access these services. Also, we consolidated number of ministries, as I mentioned. We also consolidated the Ministry of Environment and Protection and Natural Resources and the Ministry of Agriculture, so that we are building agriculture, which actually has the biggest impact on environment, on a sustainable environmental basis and aspects. Third direction is very important, is fast economic growth, but it should be sustainable economic growth and inclusive growth. We adopted number of different strategies, also rural development strategies, because especially rural population is vulnerable. That's why we need to have a clear policy in rural development using actually develop also services in rural areas, giving different economic opportunities to rural communities. This is not agriculture, but also other economic rural activities like processing industry, consolidation centers, and so on. And also sustainable use of forest resources and natural resources in rural places. This is also a very important part. Fourth part is actually infrastructural development. This is transformation of development of communication, so that rural places and urban places, they are interlinked and connected to each other, so that people are more resilient, having access to wider services, and that is a very important precondition for economic development, so that we are boosting economic development in that sense. But when we talk about development, we always consider sustainable development, and SDG goals are integrated into national strategies and national development plans. For these reasons, actually, all objectives are reflected in these national strategies. We set up a special council under the government, and this is headed by the head of government administration, so that there is full coordination among different ministries and agencies, and we set up an electronic platform monitoring achievements and implementation of these goals and objectives. Otherwise, we can set up nice plans, but it's very important that we have a proper monitoring systems for all these strategies and policy documents. We recently adopted an environmental assessment code, new code, which is very important that and we expanded activities which needs environmental assessment and public, it considers also wider engagement of our society in environmental assessment process and decisions, so that when we do large infrastructural projects which are very important for the economic development, environmental aspects is considered, and there is big participation of society, different stakeholders on municipal level, on central government, or civil society, and so on. So these are the areas, actually, the examples that we are helping our society to be more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comprehensive account of the policies and institutional framework put in place, and all that counts to building the resilience. Let me move to His Excellency, Mr. Alexander Bedrysky. Besides all his other accomplishment, he's also the President Emeritus of the World Meteorological Organization. So I think he will not only bring in the perspective of how Russia is building its resilience, and Russia has had its share of the oil price shock that I talked about, and the contraction that occurred, and the contagion that followed from it. But I think you will also hopefully shed light on your other roles that you have performed. Over to you, Your Excellency. I left you to the last so that you could take more time.
Спасибо большое, уважаемая госпожа Ахтар, уважаемые Ваше Превосходительство, дамы и господа. Я благодарен за приглашение принять участие в этом важном форуме, потому что, собственно говоря, вопросы, которые обсуждаются здесь, направление устойчивого развития, является единственным путем, на базе которого может развиваться человечество. Что касается России, после принятия повестки Дня в области устойчивого развития, мы проанализировали существующие политические и стратегические документы, которые имеют горизонт действия до 2020-2030 года, и убедились в том, что все 17 целей устойчивого развития охватываются этими документами в разной степени. Вместе с тем, работа по развитию политических целей и задач, она продолжается в рамках нашего закона о стратегическом планировании. И, соответственно, идет процесс подготовки новых документов политических, которые как раз будут действовать до 2030 года. Естественно, эти политические документы, такие как, например, концепция демографической политики, энергетическая стратегия, водная стратегия, доктрина продовольственной безопасности, ставят политические цели и задачи. А вот их реализация осуществляется уже через соответствующие государственные программы, которые обеспечиваются ежегодным финансированием из бюджета. Надо сказать, что, конечно, успех в достижении целей, он зависит от того, насколько адекватно будут представлены результаты деятельности, которая осуществляется по достижению целей этих политических документов, в соответствующих индикаторах, которые позволяли бы давать оценку достижения определенного уровня. Мы проанализировали те глобальные показатели, которые были разработаны для достижения целей развития. Их, насколько мне известно, порядка 230 разработано, причем примерно 140 показателей, индикаторов имеют уже международно утвержденные методики. Ну и вот на основе этого анализа наше правительство в прошлом году утвердило уже для оценки достижений целей устойчивого развития 90 показателей из этих 143. Конечно, этого недостаточно, эта работа продолжается, и она касается вот в данном случае показателей для глобальной оценки, но вместе с тем мы разрабатываем сейчас национальную платформу для оценки достижений целей устойчивого развития, в которой рассматривается порядка 300 индикаторов уже для представляющих особенности нашей страны. И мы рассчитываем, что вот эта работа, которая будет выполнена, позволит всесторонне оценивать достижения уже на протяжении ежегодной основе достижения таких целей устойчивого развития. Ну и для того, чтобы можно было представлять эти данные, наше статистическое ведомство государственное представляет эти показатели, и, соответственно, динамика их достижения будут опубликованы в открытом доступе в интернет. Вместе с тем, конечно, работа по движению к целям устойчивого развития, по их достижению, должна вестись не только на уровне государственных решений. Мы понимаем, что без интеграции усилий наших компаний, предпринимательского сообщества, без усилий и объединения гражданского общества невозможно наиболее эффективное решение этих задач. Поэтому направление этой работы также присутствует в наших планах. Я должен сказать, что наши объединения предпринимателей сейчас активно обсуждают возможности интеграции целей, соответственно, области своей деятельности, интеграции задач устойчивого развития в собственные корпоративные стратегии развития. И наши крупные компании уже такой подход используют, правда, их еще немного, но, тем не менее, мы рассчитываем, что процесс этот будет двигаться дальше, и задачи устойчивого развития также будут в целях корпоративных стратегий большинства наших компаний. Что касается гражданского общества, то, конечно, мы понимаем, что если каждый человек не будет осведомлен или не будет ощущать свою причастность и участие в достижении, в решении задач устойчивого развития, то, конечно, это будет в целом процесс тормозить. Поэтому мы рассчитываем на то, что объединение гражданского общества как раз может осуществляться на платформе совместных действий. И для этого мы используем различные формы. Ну, например, прошлый год был объявлен президентом Российской Федерации годом экологии, в рамках которого проводилось очень много мероприятий с участием наших неправительственных организаций, гражданского общества, и где каждый, начиная с детского возраста, мог ощутить свою причастность и ощутить ту пользу, которую он может принести, решая задачи природоохранного направления, экологические задачи. Ну вот этот год у нас объявлен годом волонтера, годом добровольца, и мы рассчитываем, что тоже и в этой области можно будет объединить усилия наших граждан для того, чтобы сфокусировать их внимание на различных направлениях широкого спектра задач устойчивого развития. Ну, я должен сказать, что, конечно, на этом пути у нас есть проблемы, но я думаю, что вот в рамках, так сказать, обсуждения других вопросов я этого коснусь. Спасибо.
Thank you for laying this overview of your planning processes at sectoral level and how these are financed by budget and your very outcome-driven approach with, of course, statistical development, as you have talked about. Let me now go for a second round of request, where I believe it would be very helpful, having heard the broader perspective, but somewhat like what Rajiv was doing a while back, is to go into the specifics of the shocks and the learnings from the shock and what resilience policies or approaches or modalities have been adopted. So with that broad question, I'm going to go around again with our panelists. First with Minister from Georgia, appealing to kind of focus more on the types of the shocks your economy may have faced and how resilient it has been or how it lacked resilience and what policy or approaches you adopted to build, foster resilience. Over to you.
Thank you. Excellency, thank you very much. Georgia has its complex mountainous topography, and we are prone to hydrogeomorphological processes, natural hazards like landslides and floods and flash floods and avalanches, mud flows. Everything can happen in our case. And we experienced in 2013 flood in Tbilisi and in Devdoraki Gorge, which actually closed the roads, which is the main transit road linking several South Caucasus countries to each other. This was a really big challenge for us to set up a new system to make society more resilient towards these natural hazards and natural disasters. National Environmental Agency is part of the Ministry of Environment, Protection and Agriculture, and we developed a full monitoring system in the country for early warning. This is an automatic system in risky places in gorges, so we collect hydrometeorological data, and we also integrated different line ministries and agencies, so in early warning system, so that information is delivered through this special system to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Infrastructure and Regional Development. Of course, our ministry has full information on this, so that we make this, we can prevent the effect of natural disaster in many places. Also, I have to mention that in a special Rioni basin, and we have around 26,000 different rivers, but the largest basin in western part of Georgia, in Rioni Basin, we also established a full monitoring system. So we collect all this data and we enable around 200,000 people to live in a safer environment right now. So this is just an example of maybe a short success story, but this was after we really discovered that we were too vulnerable to this kind of natural disasters and threats, so we create a system which makes us more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you. I presume you mean you relocated about 200,000 people?
No, we don't relocate it, but the people living in made the safe environment.
Make the, okay, you rebuild it in a way that it would be safe. Okay, let me now turn to Kika to get her perspective on these specificities moving forward.
In our experience with building resilience, there are obviously a number of concerns, but due to time, I will only share a couple. One of the key issues or lessons is understanding the drivers of risk and then determining which groups are the most vulnerable to the risk. An example, following the floods of Cyclone Evan in 2012, communities in the floodplains were given options to relocate, or if they prefer to remain on their lands, they would have to look at different house construction models, such as houses on stilts. But back home, we have this disaster management committee, which draws in all management of government ministries and organizations, whereas they've been doing a lot of trainings and awareness for all the communities, rural, and we also have government reps, both male and females in all villages. And this is where we meet every month, and the awareness programs for all people, preparedness for times of disaster. So this is how we work in our own small islands back home. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me turn back to Your Excellency Alexander Bedrusky to really get a sense on the shocks that the economy has faced and how resilient it's emerging from the policy approaches. But what was the learning and what were the main policy responses that were taken to those different types of shocks?
Спасибо. Россия, как и многие страны мира, испытывает давление последние десятилетия со стороны природной среды, со стороны тех изменений, которые происходят сейчас с климатом. И мы имеем возможность видеть явления, которые в течение сотни лет вообще не возникали на территории. Например, это наводнение на реке Амур в 2013 году на протяжении 1500 километров одновременно это явление возникло и, конечно, привело к колоссальным потерям и ущербу. Ежегодно в России фиксируется примерно около 400 таких явлений, которые наносят ущерб экономике. И, к сожалению, тенденция вот за последние 20 лет показывает, что с каждым годом количество таких явлений растет. Это, конечно, есть и явления, связанные с изменением климата, потом погодные явления опасные приобретают все больший размах. И, конечно, без учета этих рисков, без выработки соответствующих стратегий невозможно минимизировать ущерб и угрозу для жизнеобеспечения. Механизмы для этого созданы и существуют, в том числе и межминистерское взаимодействие, которое возглавляет Министерство по чрезвычайным ситуациям. И в рамках этого механизма происходит работа по ликвидации последствий, ну и, конечно, осуществляются превентивные мероприятия. В настоящее время я хотел бы подчеркнуть важность работы, которая осуществляется в нашей стране по выполнению положений Парижского соглашения по изменению климата. Мы пока не ратифицировали это соглашение, но тем не менее правительством принято решение о разработке стратегии низкоэмиссионного развития и подготовке адаптационных мероприятий в различных секторах нашей экономики. Для того, чтобы оценить экономическую целесообразность, возможности проведения такой адаптации к климатическим изменениям, мы разработали концепцию планирования адаптационных мероприятий для различных секторов экономики. И в то же время понимая, что проводить такие мероприятия невозможно, когда это касается особенно экосистем почвы, лесных ресурсов, водных ресурсов, мы значит, сориентировали научное сообщество наше на подготовку соответствующих исследований и разработки научных рекомендаций для того, чтобы уже экономические и политические решения принимались с учетом научных рекомендаций. И вот если будет возможность, я могу представить информацию по национальному докладу, который был разработан у нас. Это глобальные изменения климата и почвенные и лесные ресурсы России. Там очень много фактов собрано. И, например, наши ученые после оценок сделали такой вывод, что если традиционные методики подсчета, скажем, углерода в почве на территории нашей страны говорят о том, что примерно соотношение углерода в почве и площади это 12% от мировых запасов, то оценка углубленная научная содержания углерода, который связывает почву, у нас оказывается не 12%, а 23% мировых запасов почвы. Это показывает, какой огромный потенциал заключается в этих экосистемах. И при неправильном взаимоотношении развития и поведения экосистем этот углерод может быть как раз в виде эмиссий, давать нагрузки, опять же, на климатическую систему. Вместе с тем, если мы разрабатываем на основе научных рекомендаций мероприятия по повышению устойчивости развития, то как раз мы можем добиться того, чтобы почва дополнительно связывала углерод из природного цикла и таким образом снижала нагрузку на экосистему в рамках направления землепользования лесного хозяйства. Эта работа дает эффект в том числе и в краткосрочном плане, но, что особенно важно, является такой фундаментом для эффективности принимаемых долгосрочных решений. Спасибо.
Thank you for being specific. Let me turn to Rajiv to follow with other panelists and get more deeper into the variety of shocks and also cover beyond, say, natural disasters, because the frequency of the natural disasters is very high in our region, accounting for almost half of the world disasters. But there are other type of shocks that we also face, particularly in South Asia, given that we have the highest proportion of poor in terms of the Asia-Pacific region, and also the region has somewhat lagged on the MDGs frontier too, so it complicates resilience going forward. Over to you, Raj.
Yeah, thank you, Shamshad. Thank you very much. Let me divide the shocks in a few categories. I think that will be useful. One, for example, is the commodity price shock. So when global commodity prices either go up a lot or go down, we are at the receiving end of it. The second one, for example, would be the financial shocks that we get in 2010. We need to respond to those. The third would be the shocks from the meteorological shocks. That you get drought and floods, and which are now becoming more and more sort of an extreme, if you like, because of the climatic change. And then, then you've got the natural disaster shocks. And then finally, what you mentioned, I think, which is very important, which let us put it as, poverty shocks, because, when people slip into poverty, large numbers. And so let me start off by the sort of response, for each one of them that we can get, and we can actually, do it together. For the commodity price shocks, on the one hand, let's say when the global oil prices begin to rise, you need to reduce your dependence on fossil fuel. And hydrocarbons. So this is where, our Prime Minister has declared the ambitious target of 175 gigawatts of renewable power, solar and wind. And not only that, but he, along with President Macron, launched the International Solar Alliance, for the first meeting of which was held recently in Delhi. And I think 50 countries committed themselves to developing the solar energy in a much bigger way, just for this particular, to try and get over that. Just the reverse of that is at the moment as we talk, the continued decline in agricultural commodity prices, which hurt our farmers. So that what we need to therefore get there is some sort of a mechanism, which again, Niti Aayog is trying to do, is to ensure a minimum level of income for farmers. Not just through minimum support prices, but also by terms of trying to introduce new agricultural practices which will give them more sustainability, diversity, etc. So that's the sort of global price shock. The second one, on the financial shocks, we experienced a lot, in both the 90s and then 2008. And I think this is where we need to work together in the region to try and agree to some prudential norms and bilateral, multilateral swaps, if you like, so that we can come to each other's, assistance when some countries, face these shocks. The third one, which is the natural disasters. We've constituted the National Disaster Management Authority, and these can, earthquakes can hardly be predicted. But tsunamis can be, and floods can be. So we've done rather well in terms of the last tsunami that hit our coast of Orissa. There was, I think, just 1 or 2 lives lost. So there was collateral damage, but the loss of human life was minimized. I talked about the poverty shock, and there, what we have achieved in the last 3 years is direct benefit transfers. So directly transferring the benefits to the beneficiary through a combination of what we call the JAM Trinity, which is we have opened 310 million accounts of those who are so far excluded from the financial system, the formal financial system. We've got them the unique identities, and we've got the mobile telephony, and we've combined those three to ensure that something like 340 schemes now, the benefits are transferred directly to the beneficiaries, and so that they don't, it doesn't go through a chain of intermediaries where all the leakages happen. And we are hoping that we will be able to shift even our food distribution system towards this thing. And this in a way ensures and insulates the poor from the shocks of poor governance and sometimes inefficient delivery of public services. Just let me mention one thing in last, which is that what we may want to do going forward is to prioritize our own indicators. We've got 178 of these in our nationally voluntarily selected indicators. We've increased them to 300. But could we prioritize, let's say, for each goal that we've got, and agree to 4 or 5 principal ones, maybe through a analytical exercise of doing a social cost benefit analysis of these, because that will help us monitor them much more carefully and then preventing these shocks from occurring. So that's the...
Very good. suggestion for our follow-up work at the ESCAP platform. Clearly, we have different mechanism of prioritization, but rather than explain them and take a bit of a time from other speakers and discussants, let me lay out that I'm going to now call on two of our very able discussant for this session, and then come back to the panelists with more difficult questions, so you have time to further reflect on what else you had in store to talk about. Given that we are not on a table, it's sometimes difficult to see the order. So we have three discussants now, and I'm going to call on two discussants first and then go to the civil society. And the two discussants are really partners in development with us. One is the Asian Development Bank, that is the regional development bank, and we are very fortunate to have Mr. Bambang Susantono, Vice President of Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development with us, who's sitting out there, and he will probably speak from that platform, if you don't mind, to save time. I think Asian Development Bank is our old institution. Me and Rajiv, we are of course always full of admiration for the depth and breadth of the work that it does. But I think we are very fortunate that the two partners that have always contributed in working together on the Sustainable Development Agenda, and more particularly on the thematic report this year. But we have had this tradition for some time. It predates to the MDGs, where we have always regularly joined hands with Asian Development Bank and our sister organization, United Nations Development Program. So over to you, Bambang, and you can talk about anything that helps build resilience based on all the technical, analytical work, and also some of your transaction-oriented responses and support that you have provided to the countries. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Dr. Akhtar. It was a very interesting discussion touching many aspects of the SDGs. I have 4 points of observations. First, on the complexity that we are all facing. We are all affected by the diverse range of increasingly complex challenges and also risks that affect countries in our regions. This reality was driven home to me personally a few months ago, as I found myself neck deep in water in a hotel in Samoa that had been flooded during the Gita cyclone. I was lucky to find my way out with only a few possessions lost. Too many people in our region are not so lucky. Countries in Asia and the Pacific are already amongst the most vulnerable to natural hazard in the world. A recent ADB report took stock of the best available science on the impacts of the climate change on human systems in our regions. It reinforced what we should already know, that unabated climate change will likely result in a 6-degree temperature change, bringing devastating consequences. The region's weather system, agricultural and fishery sectors, land and marine biodiversity, domestic and regional security, trade, urban development, migration, and also health will all be disrupted. It will pose an existential threat to some countries in the region and crush any hope of achieving sustainable and inclusive development. Building the region's resilience to support the transformations required to support sustainable development has never been more urgent. Second, on the resilient infrastructures, we are here that all panelists expressly recognize the need to ensure the resilience of infrastructure. Risk-informed development is essential. Rapid technology change is creating many opportunities to integrate more complex information about risk into development processes. For example, planners, project developers, and investors like the ADB are now able to harness more complete and complex data on exposure to various climate, physical, and economic risks into infrastructure design and investment choices to help ensure the resilience. ADB is supporting such processes, including by mainstreaming climate risk and wider resilience considerations into all infrastructure program it finances. We are supporting our developing member countries to undertake spatial analysis to location-specific exposure and vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure. We have extensive work underway to support resilient urban development. We are also trying to support a greater focus on green solutions and investment in natural capital, recognizing that ecosystems often provide vital services for local resilience. These measures complement our ongoing efforts to support disaster risk reductions in developing member countries, in addition to providing the necessary emergency financing when the worst happens. Third, on the gender and resilience. A focus on gender equality can play a crucial role in bringing about the transformations towards sustainable and resilient communities south in our regions. There is growing recognition of the fact that women may be disproportionately affected by the impacts of natural hazards, as they may have fewer formal assets, such as land and property, or less able to access available information on imminent threats. There is an urgent need to increase the gender sensitivity of disaster risk reductions, climate change adaptation and mitigations, and wider resilience building efforts in our regions. On the other hand, we also know that women are also powerful agents of change in their communities and champions for transformation and resilience. Let me give you some examples. In Cambodia, the Emergency Food Assistance Project set a quota that 50% of elected members of the local committees managing the program should be women. This measure empowered rural women in 10 provinces to actively take part in decisions around livelihoods, food security, nutrition, and hygiene. By the end of the projects, women reported increased confidence to speak up in community meetings and status in their community. Fourth, or lastly, on the integrated approaches. All the points raised during the discussions and the holistic nature of the 2030 agenda combine to make strong case for much more integrated and coordinated approaches to development from planning, policy, to project level. Again, let me give you an example. In supporting urban bus rapid transit system in Peshawar, Pakistan, ADB has paid special attention to designing the system that make it safe and attractive for women to use by including proper lighting, closed-circuit television cameras, separate toilets, separate ticketing counters for women, and clearly marked accessible places where they can report harassment in the design of the system. The system is also designed to reduce the environmental footprint of the transportations while also serving vital mobility needs to support sustainable development. We will need to find new mechanisms, incentive, and monitoring approaches to encourage such integrations. In closing, there is a challenge and associated risks everywhere we look, but there is also opportunity that can help us to make progress on the SDGs. A focus on resilience and transformation can help us find and seize new opportunities and manage associated risks. We will need to find ways to make this transition as smooth as possible and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. I'm going to take the liberty of asking you a follow-up question, although you're not a panelist, strictly speaking, but I think given the richness. I think Rajiv mentioned about regional cooperation, which is very critical when we face economic and financial shocks. Is there anything recently, I know ADB has done phenomenal work in promoting financial cooperation, and besides the Chiang Mai and the bond initiative, if there are some new initiatives that you are taking forward, it would be very informative for the member states here.
Thank you. Yes, we are stepping up on our regional cooperations, not only in regions, but also in the sub-regions. And the wide range topics are covered, not only the hard infrastructure, for example, but also social infrastructure like health and education. We recognize that it is not only regional public goods that we have to work together, but also regional public bad, as the disease, for example, or other haze, or perhaps the other sort of like negative regional public bads that are happening in our regions. In all, I think that we're stepping up on that directions, and our strategy 2030, the draft that now we are working, is clearly mentions about the specific roles, especially for the MDBs like us, in trying to strengthen the regional cooperations among nations in various levels of the not only government but also the civil societies and also the private sectors.
Okay. Thank you for my indulgence responding to my question here. Let me turn, and I have the pleasure to invite Holiang Shu. He's United Nations Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Assistant Administrator and Regional Director for Asia Pacific, wearing several hats. I can't see you, Holiang. I don't know where you are. Okay. Thank you, Holiang. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Under Secretary General Akhtar, for inviting UNDP to participate. I'm very pleased to represent our administrator, Mr. Akin Steiner, who unfortunately cannot come here in person. And distinguished panelists, the distinguished delegates, I think the subject of this session is extremely important. And we are all aware of the various shocks and risks that have been mentioned. And many trend analysis, the mega trends analysis, have all pointed to some significant developments that are causing, exacerbating these risks. A study we recently conducted together with the Economist Intelligence Unit point to the mega trends such as climate change, demographic transition, rising inequalities, and the fourth industrial revolution, right? All of which have impact on the capacity of our societies to cope with shocks and all generating new shocks. So, so I think the central point that my comments is that to deal with these shocks, and the transformation is necessary in building the resilience and promoting sustainability, right, to deal with these kind of complexities. Right? And innovation is critical for this transformation to happen, right, in order to achieve the SDGs and through the resilience and other approaches. So I'm using a few minutes of my time to give some examples, of how countries, have actually significantly achieved the resilience building, and through different innovative approaches. And one of the approaches that many countries have adopted is, to change their mindset, right, and approach on resilience building. Okay. I think our distinguished panelist from India, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, knows very well the example of Odisha, how they have, minimized the casualty from major disaster events by adopting a significant approach of evacuation pre-disasters. Right? In 1999, a cyclone event caused more than 10,000 deaths. In 2013, a similar strength cyclone caused 42 deaths. And that's simply because the government changed its approach and evacuated 1 million people ahead of the event. And similarly, we're learning from this experience. We worked with many governments to learn lessons from it. And in the Philippines, we saw similar results. The Haiyan cyclone in 2013, right, caused significant casualties, right? And they adopted a similar approach of early warning system, development of evacuation routes, training, and evacuated 500,000 people, right, in a similarly strong event in 2014 that did not have any casualty. Right. So I think this kind of change of approach, and I think is a major way for countries to build resilience in its population. Another example that we have seen is use of technology, right, to improve the efficiency of early response and awareness among population. And one recent example is from the Bangladesh, and we were happy to work with the government and with Bangladesh, a teletalk, company, and the Bangladesh Meteorological Department, right? And we worked together to build a system called Interactive Voice Response System that can now reach 110 million people through cell phone before a disaster strikes, a cyclone disaster strikes. And it can reach 88 million people before a flooding event strikes 2 days in advance. That will save $500 million of assets in each disaster event. So technology can be one powerful way to deal with this. Another innovation that we have done in partnership with Japan is to use very low cost but very effective way of educating school children, school students, right, to generate their awareness and the ability to respond to tsunamis. So working with the Japanese government and the 18 governments in the Asia and the Pacific, and until now we have reached 34,000 students in 65 schools in 14 high-risk countries, and we're on the way to reach more students in these countries. It demonstrates that the impact on scale can be achieved by working effectively with different constituents, in this case, the children. And one more example I would like to give is to build systems. I think one of the, I think again, the Indian delegate mentioned the issue of statistics, right? So we're working with the Tohoku University in Sendai, right, Japan, right, and with Fujitsu Corporation, okay, in partnership with the private sector, to build a database of weather of disaster events in the past, right, in 20 countries across the world, and to use big data application to predict the risks, so that we can increase risk-informed investment, right, to achieve the SDGs. So that will help significantly to build a resilience. The last example I would give is that, we have to really using the new innovative approaches, right, to help build the assets among the poor, so that we can increase the resilience of the poor to deal with shocks. And again, I have an example from India, where we are planning to work with the city of Chandigarh, right, to build, to use blockchain technology to build a land registry system. So we have thousands of land registries across the region and in the world, but often they are affected by the lack of transparency, right, and the difficulties, of identify owners, for land plots, that cannot easily be, used for building assets for the poor, and so that they cannot be protected, during disaster events and so forth. So using blockchain technology, we can address many of these concerns of transparency, efficiency, because all records can be public and can, help achieve the resilience. So and these are just a few examples where we can work with our governments, to scale up some of these applications, and really, work together in partnerships, right, to achieve the goal of, sustainable development. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hao-Liang. I have been forewarned that we are running ahead of the schedule, but I do want to get back to our panelists and request them to give very succinct 1-minute response of any last-minute thought they may have. But I think one of the points that Hao-Liang mentioned is to look at more innovative approaches to build resilience of poor, and that is a question that I was going to pose. So if within 1 minute each of you can talk about just 1 or 2 examples, and I'd like to then conclude. Oh, okay. So let me go back to the panelists. So let me start with you, Your Excellency, Mr. Alexander, first, and then I go this way.
Спасибо. Ну, я хотел бы в заключении своего выступления привести два таких коротких соображения. Прежде всего, вот это региональное сотрудничество для стран, конечно, имеет исключительно важное значение, когда объектом сотрудничества служат цели или задачи, которые надо решать всем организациям. Ну вот пример у меня такой. Это региональная организация, где участвует Россия, Евразиатский экономический союз, представители здесь есть. И мы существенно продвигаемся в рамках этой организации по решению, совместному решению задач достижения целей устойчивого развития. Это, так сказать, по задачам. В том, что касается объектов, которые создают риски, это, как правило, природные явления, и я должен в качестве примера эффективного регионального и межрегионального сотрудничества привести пример, скажем, Комитет по тайфунам, ESCAP и Всемирной метеорологической организации, который на протяжении уже многих лет решает вопросы совершенствования прогностических моделей, механизмов раннего предупреждения и таким образом существенно снижает риски для стран Азиатско-Тихоокеанского региона, Латинской Америки, как раз в области, которым больше всего чувствительны бедные слои населения этих стран. И вот такое сотрудничество, его приоритеты для стран показывают, что именно региональные аспекты имеют большое значение, поскольку рассматриваются конкретные для конкретных регионов проблемы, которые дают эффект вот, и в снижении бедности, и в более эффективном экономическом развитии стран. Спасибо.
Very good intervention. I think example of how to foster regional cooperation further has come out, but also the partnership, which has been an excellent partnership between ESCAP and WMO. Rajiv, over to you.
Thanks. Just two examples. One is about using the digital technology much more than what you have. And that's really, can be used in so many different ways to improve resilience. One, for example, in the health sector, if you can get your ground level workers equipped with very simple tablets who can then take the data from the beneficiaries, the children or the mothers, etc., and then feed them back into the central system, or or telemedicine that's now becoming so common. We are establishing 150,000 wellness centers, which will hopefully be equipped with with the basic telemedicine, so that you can use the cloud and then get the specialist to look at them. So that and digital also in terms of improving accountability of the public system for delivering of the services. The second one that I've just come across in the course of our very ambitious, the housing program, affordable housing program under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is the use of new building technologies, which can give you cheaper and faster and more resilient habitats. And I think that can really take you very far, because they also can introduce green aspects into that. So I think those are the two that come to the mind right away, and this is something that we are beginning to explore in India, and could be shared across across the region, as it were. So those, just let me leave at those two.
Very substantive. Over to you, Mr. Minister.
Yes. Well. Probably not so innovative, but it is very efficient. We made interventions for smallholders, for small-scale farmers, that we established a whole. We helped them to establish a whole supply chain. We co-financed plantations of new high-value fruit crops. And at the same time, we established in every village consolidation centers so that they can collect their products every day. And these are linked to larger consolidation center and also linked to the airport facility where we have the cargo terminal to make quick logistics and quick supply of high-value products to targeted markets. So this kind of interventions is really improving livelihood in that specific area.
Thank you. A very concrete proposal. Kika, over to you.
In conclusion, I would like to say that regional collaboration and platforms are useful in building resilience because there is a need to reflect on long-term trends and defining collective action inappropriate for such as the Asia-Pacific Framework for Sustainable Development. Furthermore, regional collaboration allows for the sharing of knowledge, including consideration of commonalities in risk profiles across sub-regions. Hence, there will be scope for regional monitoring mechanisms. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you so much. So we have had one last round with the panelists. Let me now turn to our last panelist, and I'd like to invite Ms. Marie-Lisa, President Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia, who you heard this morning in the opening as well, to share her perspective for this platform.
Thank you, Dr. Akhtar. Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to take this opportunity to follow through the importance given to multi-stakeholder partnerships and social enterprises as partners in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, we would like to propose that the APFSD consider social entrepreneurship as a major innovative, transformational, and multi-stakeholder platform for engaging the poor, among the women and men among the poor and marginalized towards resilience and sustainability. What are social enterprises? Social enterprises are hybrid organizations that have developed because of the poverty and inequality in many developing countries. They are social mission driven, so they're like NGOs, but unlike the ordinary NGOs, they're wealth creating, so they're like businesses. But unlike ordinary businesses, they distribute the wealth they create among the poor who are their primary stakeholders. What do we mean by social entrepreneurship? Social entrepreneurship to us could be a multi-stakeholder transformational platform at the country and regional level that could recognize and provide enabling policy and programs for these social enterprises as transformational partners of the poor, could work with civil society, governments, multilateral agencies, and the business sector to scale up impact and towards resilience and sustainability. And in the Philippines, we are happy that the National Economic Development Authority has actually already recognized a bill called Poverty Reduction Through Social Entrepreneurship as a priority bill that is now being deliberated in Congress. And of course, there have been other countries like Korea that have actually started the social entrepreneurship policy way before then. Let me just exemplify what we mean by social enterprises and social entrepreneurship as platforms by giving you one story in Central Philippines of Alter Trade and the Negros Organic and Fair Trade Association. Amidst the sugar crisis, where Negros Island was actually a monocrop economy that was dependent on sugar, the Alter Trade transformed assetless and powerless sugar workers to become entrepreneurial farmers, with government providing the enabling policy, of course, for these sugar workers to become agrarian reform beneficiaries. And they actually became, the Alter Trade built the capability of these assetless, powerless sugar workers turned agrarian reform beneficiaries to become entrepreneurial farmers, as well as leaders and members of community-based social enterprises in the form of associations and cooperatives that became the vehicles to become effective supplier communities of organic Muscovado sugar to fair trade markets abroad, but they also became vehicles for the diversification of crops and income sources so that it effectively ended hunger in between the sugar harvests, because they were now having diverse crops and also had other income sources other than from sugar. And they also helped to move them up the value chain so that these producers, women and men producers, are now co-owners, majority co-owners of a social enterprise called NOFTA Fair Trade House that actually does the processing, trading, and marketing for the produce of these communities. But these cooperatives and associations also became the vehicles for community development visioning, planning, and implementation, and they became the vehicles for capacity building and planning for climate change and disaster risk reduction and management. This is just one of the best practices in the region that we actually studied, and from the best practices that we've studied all over the region, we have come up with a platform promoting the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains as an offering of ISEA, the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia, as our SESDG platform to contribute to co-creating what we would want to call social entrepreneurship SDG hotspots that would show scaled up initiatives showing resilience and sustainability, and would like to invite you to our March 30 event. At 9:30 to 10:30, we have a side event to discuss this in more detail if you're interested. But in the interest of time, I'd like to express that the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia and the Social and Community Enterprise Constituency of the Asia-Pacific Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism are prepared to work with civil society, governments, multilateral agencies, and the private sector to co-create SESDG hotspots, demonstrating resilience and sustainability in the medium term, and making these SESDG hotspots transform the lives and livelihoods of a critical mass of women and men among the poor and marginalized sectors in the region to achieve resilience and sustainability as enshrined in the SDGs in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent statement and the recommendation. Indeed, social entrepreneurship is critical if we are to reach scale and to make how to go about doing it. I'm sure there's a lot we can draw from your expertise, so we look forward to the March 30th side event. I know that we are running really tight on time, so I'm not going to try to provide a summary of the rich deliberations that we have had. As I was sitting and listening to everybody, a very simple take-home that I have is that resilience is critical for sustainable development implementation. But sustainable development itself, progress on sustainable development cannot be achieved without progress on building resilience. So we are very fortunate that we have had a discussion that has brought about this reinforcement on both the sides, where we heard from our panelists how countries are positioning to implement sustainable development, and then we have managed to juxtapose this with concrete examples, both at a micro and at a scale level, on how to reinforce this. So I'm going to stop here, but request you to give a show of hands, recognizing the richness of the debate that our panelists have been able to bring to the table. And inform us from their rich experiences, both at country level and their own intellectual support that they have provided to this platform.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will into our lunchtime, and given that we are running out of time and interpretation services should have a deserved break, I suggest we take further statements in the next session, which is still under the same agenda item. We will now break for lunch. I close this session. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to make just a few announcements. The ministerial lunch will take place in meeting room E. Your liaison officers will be happy to escort all invited delegates. For all other participants, we invite you to enjoy our sustainable food options in the cafeteria on the first floor and at the local food stalls in our garden that are set up on the ground floor. We invite delegates to join our side events during the lunch break from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Kindly see the program on our touch screens for more information, and we will also put up a slide in this room with more information on rooms. We also invite all delegates to visit the Pavilion of Partnerships and the selfie booth on the first floor. We will resume here in conference room 1 at 1:30 p.m. sharp with session 2. Kindly return on time to avoid any further delays. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.
Now we will move to MRE.
Yes, meeting room B.
Yes.
आपको हिंदुओं को बैठना चाहिए न्यू बिल्डिंग टेक्नोलॉजी
Sir.
तो काफ़ी कुछ हो सकता है
Particularly which reduces the time of construction and cost also.
लागी टेक्नोलॉजी है साउथ अफ्रीकन है सेफ्टी उनका नहीं 6 feet precast walls and longevity of 25 years.
I was seeing an article last week, sir, on Flipboard, that online magazine that comes, which was like house printing, sir, 3D printing of the house.
Ask for
No, you can use the elevator as well, right? You can leave out from the side door, and then there's an elevator. You can
Go down one floor. Okay. Just in front of Singapore, right?
Less crowded.
It's okay. Like I think by the time everybody's done, the DS will go.
With the elevator?
So to reach the 15th floor, do you have the badge?
He has the other badge, but we'll see. Yeah.
If not, I'll get you one.
Okay.
That's why. But I have one. Horntip has 2 more. Text me.
I'll text you.
You're going to bring him to the room E?
Sorry?
You're going to bring her to E.
To the lunchroom.
Yeah.
I don't know if she wants to talk, or maybe she'll go later on. Maybe she wants to stop a moment and see all this. Because I have to get her to clear the press release.